Hey guys, and welcome to the c-betting section of the course. Now, I want to preface with talking about why I think a c-betting section is important, because when we're talking about exploiting people post-flop, there are a million things going on, and there are a million spots, and there is a very specific reason why I think it's important to start and to delve deep into c-betting, because in a way, the c-bet is the first decision in the post-flop game tree. So kind of everything flows from the c-bet strategy and the response to the c-bet strategy. This is like the root of everything, of every strategy post-flop. And very often, if you were to describe a player type to me and you'd ask me, Uri, how should I adjust to this guy? I'd start out with the c-bet. You always start out with a c-bet. So it's a very, very important aspect of the game to understand. It's an aspect that since forever, and also these days, a lot of people use shortcuts or autopilot it without understanding why. And very often the shortcuts and the autopilots are actually really effective against some people. Similar to the sizing chapter, once you become aware of what's going on in the c-betting sub-game of poker, you get to level up against a lot of guys and pick counters to what they're doing and pick your strategy to counter them, etc. Yeah, it's a big subject. This first chapter, I'm going to try to go through kind of an overview of what you guys are going to see in the next chapters, and the next few chapters I will be diving in deeper. Yeah, so starting out a bit historical, the first kind of c-betting strategy was to just c-bet, which means, you have the initiative, just bet with everything. What was this effective? The answer is yes, it was extremely effective. People were overfolding massively, both to the c-bet and to turn and river barrels, so you had compounding EV effect. What was a really great time to be a poker player, and I remember back in the day I wasn't even playing poker, but I'd hear of people who made the transition from other games to poker who were saying, poker you can make money, but the game is so boring. And I think part of the reason was that there are a lot of these very simple strategies that just seem to crush in the environment. Like all you need to do is bet, and you're already a winning player, or something like that. That was the old school environment with, and the reasons having to do with people not calling enough and not check raising enough, and we'll get more in depth into all of those fairly soon. And yeah, just like we can talk about c-betting everything, which, people used to do with a big size, and these days a lot of people do the same with a small size. There are counters to people who c-bet everything, and the counters are counters post-flop, but there are also counters pre-flop, and we're going to examine those in depth and really go a step deeper into the exploiting game than we have gone up to now, because when we look at a counter, we'll look at the counter to the counter, and we'll look at how easy each one is to spot and how you can disguise them and really delve deeper into these kind of things. It's one big section. Next section is going to be about what I call the intuitive polar c-betting strategy. And the intuitive polar c-betting strategy is actually connected to the punching bag sims from the previous sizing chapter, where we looked and saw what each of our hands want to do. And the idea behind an intuitive polar strategy is that you know how much money each of the hands in your range wants to get into the pot. The middle pair maybe wants to get... Of course, people then didn't have the tools or knowledge to do it in the way that I showed you guys, so we're getting it wrong. The idea is, with a weak top pair, maybe I want 2 medium-sized bets in. With a good top pair, maybe I want 3. With ace high, maybe I want 0. Or with an under pair, I want 0, and you kind of divided your hands into buckets of how much money you wanted with each one. And then you would put each one into a line. Hopefully this is not too abstract, but yeah, so the idea is basically once each hand knows how much money it wants to put in, you put it into a line where it accomplishes that. Now, if I told you my hand wants to put 3 bets in, I have to bet the hand. You can't check it back. But any hand that wants to put in 2 bets or less, is a candidate to check back. And the nice thing was that back in this time period, people were not really over-betting. So let's say you have a weak top pair and you're like, okay, I want 2 bets in. You check back and, 2 bets are going in. It's tough for more to go in. Maybe if you got check raised on the turn, but then that was also a bit rare. Like if you delay c-bet, get check raised and villain bets river, then 3 bets would go in. But you would have a lot of control over the pot size. And then middle pairs would tend to check back one to 2 times. Weak top pairs are the same. Ace highs, pocket pairs, all these hands would play very pot control-y. And the check back range tended to be very well defined. It would have some trash, of course, but generally, some kind of weak middle pairish hand or ace high hand or weak top pair hand. And as the strategy got more refined, it got a bit more deceptive, because if you play this, check back all my middle pairs, then people started to counter that by check calling a flop bet, and if the middle card paired, they'd start donk betting huge. And then you would have an incentive to bet some middle pairs. So this strategy slowly evolved into something a bit more complex, depending on the time period you looked at it. But at its root, I call it intuitive polar, and there are, of course, nuances and levels that you can put in there. And this is also a very common strategy. It's a very easy strategy, and it is not used much today, even though it's very effective against several player types. And it's actually one of the levels of the level and more of the range bet strategy, which I'm sure people don't realize. But this is one of the levels you should be at, is actually intuitive polar, which is really cool to see, and which we will see. So we're going to look at that common strategy to see, not as common as it used to be, but still fairly common to see people doing something like this. So we want to know, again, kind of the counters to the strategy, and when and who to use it against. And yeah, we're going to finish off by talking about solvers and modern c-betting strategy, which is infinitely more complicated than the, c-bet everything or intuitive polar, but which also bears striking similarities to these two in a lot of situations, and is important to understand and to know, like, when to use it, how do you counter it, and all these things. Yeah, so that's going to be more or less a c-betting chapter. Like always, I'm going to weave in a bunch of things from different places and try to tell you guys some stories, because I did live through all these time periods. And the one of the cool things is that as you start working with a solver in a bit of a deeper way, you actually see these strategies pop up as counters to things that really happen. So they are in no way obsolete. They're all effective. And all of this, I think, is very important to know. So let's get started. Hope you guys enjoy it.